And welcome to the Development Permit Panel. On the panel today we have Milton Chan, our Director of Engineering, on my right, and we also have Peter Russell, our Director of Sustainability, on my left, and my name is Joe Urseg. I'm the General Manager of Planning. The Development Permit Panel will be looking at two projects today. We review development permits we look at design aspects of the projects. We don't decide zoning. So, you know, for the... you
have to speak up.
Okay. Can we turn up the system? How are you guys doing at the back? Can you hear me? Okay, they can hear. So we don't determine zoning. So if a property is zoned for, say, condominiums, which one of the projects is, the panel does not get to decide whether or not you can put condominiums on the site. We are simply tasked with looking at the design of the project. Council controls zoning through other mechanisms. So we have two applications on the agenda today. For each application, we will hear from the applicants with a presentation. We'll hear city staff comments. We will then provide an opportunity for anybody that's in attendance today to speak, to come up to the microphones and speak to the panel and make any comments that you wish. We will also deal with any written correspondence, any letters or emails that we've received. The panel will deliberate and formulate a recommendation for council whether to approve or not the project. So that's sort of the housekeeping. The first item on the agenda is adoption of some minutes held at a previous meeting on October the 25th. There's someone to move those.
Second.
Okay, call the question, they're adopted. So that brings us to the first application on the agenda today. It's a development permit for SNC Lavalin Inc. The property location is, well, it's actually several lots in the vicinity of 12,700 Rice Mill Road and 12,280 Number 5 Road. And the purpose of this development permit is to allow for the redevelopment of the existing BC Ferries fleet maintenance facility. So do we have the applicants? I think they're remote today, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair. They'll be joining in remotely.
Okay. We're waiting for the applicant.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Yes. Hi, everyone. Shane, if you could share the screen, please. Good afternoon. My name is Baljinder Mahal. I'm the General Manager for the BC Ferries Fleet Maintenance Unit at 12800 Rice Mill Road. And sorry, just give us a second to set up the presentation. Hey, thanks, Shane. So before I go into this, just a very quick overview of our facility. So we've been in operation on this site since the early 1960s. Most of our site infrastructure is actually from that era. So a key portion of this project is renewing all the site infrastructure, such as sanitary stormwater drainage, potable water main, and sanitary forest main. And in addition, we are renewing and tearing down some of the oldest, most problematic structures that are at the end of their useful life. We do the majority of the afloat refit work for BC Ferries, so essentially anything that doesn't require dry docking, and our facility has the ability to berth up to 6 vessels at any time. So that being said, our application and what we're actually asking for approval today, you see on the right-hand side, the 2023, is a downgrade from the original submission we had put in 2019. In that submission, we had actually proposed 3 large new buildings and a large tower crane. Just due to COVID and cost escalations, we've had to revise the design of the project and the application. So we're now putting forward a submission to build 1 new mechanical trades building and life extend 5 existing buildings on site. Next slide, please. So this plan view really shows the extent of the full project. What you see there in kind of orange at the south is the proposed new mechanical trades building and welding shop. And in light blue are the 5 buildings that we're life extending. And then you'll see the blue water line, which is the new potable water main. And the dark red line shows the sanitary force main, which will be running through the BC Ferries property. And then the green that kind of circles the southern point there is the new proposed stormwater drainage. And right now, as I mentioned, everything we have was essentially installed and put in place in the early 60s. So it is aged extensively. And then another key portion of this project is installing the dike for the city of Richmond. And as you can see there, it's the purple portion is the dike that we will be building through this first phase of the project. And then there's a red right-of-way that follows the railroad tracks. And then that will come in place, when we tear down and build future buildings or sea levels rise to a point that we have to build at. And so that is the full extent of the city statutory right-of-way for the dike. Next slide, please.
Many questions.
We included this slide just as an overview, just to show some renderings of what the new mechanical trades building looks like in relation to existing buildings on site. And also in the top left-hand corner, that yellow circled area shows the full extent of the demolition. So, because our site was built over the years organically, essentially, as our fleet grew and changed, we have a high number of low-rise buildings on site, and so they're very inefficient. They haven't aged well. They're all mostly at the end of their useful life. So we will be demolishing the majority of those aged structures that just essentially don't really have a lot of value and replacing them with one new structure. I'll hand it off now to Ryan Stinson, our environmental consultant.
Thank you, Jen. Good afternoon. I'm Ryan Stinson with Atkins Realis, formerly SNC-Lavalin, and I am the QEP for this development proposal. I'd like to thank you all for the opportunity to present on the environmental aspects of the project today. This first slide here, it illustrates the location of the environmentally sensitive areas and riparian management areas relative to the site that are the triggers for the City of Richmond's ESA DP process. The Shelmont Dike ESA SH5 shoreline area is shown in purple, which rings along the basin and the Fraser River. In light green, we see the Lulu Island Foreshore ESA IT5 intertidal area. And then as we move to the northern side of the site, to the north of the CN rail line, we see the Shelmont South ESA SH6 ESA area, which is an upland forest, old fields, and shrubland area. And the last two areas that I'd like to call your attention to are the 5-meter RMA, which exists along the ditch located on the southern side of Rice Mill Road, and the 15, that's in orange, and the 15-meter RMA to the east of the site, which is the slough that connects to the Fraser River. Next slide, please. On this slide here, I'd like to present a side-by-side comparison of the 2019 and 2023 main site development footprints. Here we can see in red, we see the shoreline area that was originally to be part of the project footprint. So that's on the left on the 2019 slide. And as we see on the 2023 slide, that area was reduced dramatically based on the reduction in size. We see that area was reduced by 2,422 square meters within the shoreline area and 257 square meters within the intertidal area. Next slide, please. This next slide depicts the proposed parking lot area and the segment 3 portion of the dike extension, which were added early in 2023. The impacts for both of these project components were reviewed by the City of Richmond, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and the Ministry of Forests, representing the municipal, federal, and provincial governments respectively. Both the federal and the provincial agencies issued their respective instruments of approval in October of 2023, approving this work at that level of government. And the city and BC Ferries are currently pursuing the dike servicing agreement to capture the city's requirements associated with this work. Next slide, please. So with the impacts that were, the footprint impacts which were just shown on the main site and over for the parking lot and the dike area, there was a riparian area enhancement and compensation area that was proposed for the site. This area consists of 2,976 square meters of shoreline enhancement area. That area has not changed since the 2019 proposal, so we kept that at the same area. But what did change was the amount of impact on the site, and as a result of the reduced footprint, the compensation ratio is now 3.3 to 1 as compared to 2.9 to 1, which was accepted in 2019. Meredith Mitchell from M2 Landscaping will be able to provide some further details or some particulars on the planting for this area later on in the presentation. Next slide, please. I think you jumped to there. Thank you very much. This slide is intended to show the potential impacts from the sanitary force main on ESA SH6. So that is the sanitary force main is shown in red, and the areas of the ESA are coded in gray, orange, and green. We can see that this is intended to show a comparison of the 2019 when there was 1,134 square meters of impact, where now we've been able to reduce the footprint to 1,083 square meters. Again, the compensation for this area was maintained at a consistent ratio, and I'll talk a little bit about those ratios on the next slide. But I guess this, the bottom portion of the slide is highlights some of the changes that were recently achieved through discussions with city staff, where we were able to make minor readjustments to the alignment, which are shown in blue on the two figures at the bottom. And by achieving that, we were able to avoid potential impacts on trees located within the riparian management area along the southern side of Rice Mill Road. And there was a net retention of 10 trees within the RMA that were saved as part of that realignment. Next slide, please. This slide is intended to show the changes that were made for compensation for impacts within the ESA SH6 area. As I mentioned before, there was a minor reduction in the amount of footprint, but the same compensation area of 3,186 square meters was retained. And as a result of that, those improvements, the compensation ratio, which is now 2.9 to 1, has risen from the 2.5 to 1 ratio that was included in 2019 submission. Just some notes regarding the alteration of the compensation area. Originally shown on the left, it's the dark green area, and it was intended to target an area of previous disturbance. But in order to make some improvements, we've adjusted it over to the one on the right, where we've now identified a long linear band of continuous compensation running along that area. And some of the areas that we had to deal with were some height restrictions that were placed upon tree heights where they would intersect with both the BC Hydro right of way and the water main that runs through from north to south there. As well, a portion of the move to the linear band was to avoid potential isolation of that habitat that was previously proposed in 2019 if the site was further developed. We also were intending with work with our wildlife team was to establish more of a wildlife travel corridor along the southern extent of the property, allowing access for wildlife to be able to move through the site and gain access to the freshwater source in that 15-meter RMA along the east side of the property. And we also, by moving it, we were hoping to reduce the number of potential human and wildlife interactions that we might see at the site. Next slide, please. This slide depicts the proposed water main installation and culvert removals that are planned for the ditch along Rice Mill Road. These are located within the 5-meter RMA. Both of these potential impacts were reviewed by the city, by the city, Department of Fisheries, Oceans, and Ministry of Forests. Again, those approvals were received by the federal and provincial agencies in October, and BC Ferries and the city are currently working on capturing any of the city's requirements under the Utilities Service Agreement for the water main. Next slide, please. I wanted to highlight this tree, the tree 442, which is the lodgepole pine with in the photo top left, where we can see the electrical coming in over top of it. And again, we see from the view along the road in the right photo there, that tree is located within the 5-meter RMA for the Rice Mill Road ditch. And due to the proposed water chamber required to house the meter for the city, there was a conflict between that tree and the proposed location, so that tree will have to be removed. It was an unavoidable loss, but if we look at the area in the lower left photograph, we see where 3 replacement trees will be planted to replace that RMA tree, so in a 3-to-1 ratio, and we can see those trees shown on the landscape architecture drawing there to the left. And my last slide is the next one, please. So the last slide that I have for you today shows the tree accounting that was prepared for the site. In total, there were 94 trees that are impacted by the proposed development, requiring 197 replacement trees. Working together with Meredith Mitchell, we were able to accommodate 173 of those trees within the proposed compensation areas, and we have 24 cash in lieu trees remaining that we were not able to fit into those areas. So I'll hand over the next slide to Meredith and be happy to answer any questions following the presentation.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Meredith Mitchell with MT Landscape Architecture, and I've been working fairly closely with Ryan on this submission package now. What we're showing here, I only have a few slides, I'll be relatively quick in my presentation, this is an overall aerial shot of the site. You can see the existing green condition in comparison to the areas that have been under use during the long reign of this particular site, including actually showing how the bridge across the river all the way to number 5 road. And just to give you a full context of the site and where Rice Mill Road is, that's where the red dot is right there. So you can see the existing condition and that there is shadow lines of the existing trees on site, just for context space. So if you go to the next slide, this is actually just a slide of as per what package that you have received in the review work that we had done, is that I was acting as a consultant to collate all of the information by all the different consultants on the site and provide it in a master plan and a report. So this is all the information that was provided with essentially a short Coles note in text on the second page of the submission package that we had, the report that we had to do with the overall master plan in color and hatch view and the rest of it. So that was just an explanation of how the amount of information involved on the site was more than it seemed. If you could go to the next slide, then. This is just a comprehensive discussion about the SH5, which is the area that's essentially in line with the railway and in line with Rice Mill Road, with an example of what a planting area is. This one is a highlight of where it's showing the 3 trees that are the compensation 3-3 for tree 442. All plant material is obviously native plant material, and we did have to take into account the existing condition on the site, of which there were existing native habitat trees, which has been reviewed. And this is how we were working together with Ryan to appropriately place the trees proposed on the site. And then the sand layout as well, the sand line layout. So the tree retention and replacement was coordinated both with the biologist, with the arborist, and then also with QEP, along with myself, for discussions on the size of the canopy shown on at planting, which is approximately at 5 to 8 years growth potential. Existing soil areas, the sunlight proximity, the proximity to the train corridor, all of these types of things went into the process of deciding where the trees were going, and the essentially the density of planting in those particular areas. We were taking into account species of trees, songbird habitat, forage, drought tolerance and sun tolerance, all those types of things. And also the fact that we wanted to provide a green corridor that essentially buffered the train right-of-way area to the potential area the area that's, green to essentially the west and north of the train corridor. So if you go to the next slide, that's the SH6 area, with obviously an enlargement of just the density of planting showing for the area. So you can see that the bottom corner is the amount of planting that's provided in context with corridor, habitat, songbird, shoreline, and foreshore. All plant species were vetted through the QEP and biologist and through city comment that's appropriate to those locations for microclimate, topography, and also in retention of trees. There are existing trees, as noted on the Google image I showed you previously. There are retained trees along the foreshore frontage as well. So we did want to take all of that into account to ensure that we are pocket planting with existing site soil within tree protection areas as per arborist comment and request. And then also just with future resiliency in mind for these particular areas. The next slide is actually just a discussion about, or is that the last one? Pardon me. That is the last one. The last comment we had was we were talking about the replacement trees. There was a certain amount of trees removed, both in SH6 and SH5. The 3-to-1 replacement is for the tree 442. The numbered required replacement trees is 197. We achieved 173 with a cash in lieu for the amount. That does take into account for the 3 for tree 442, and also just in accounting of the close proximity to the potential areas for disturbance in the areas that are not anticipated to be disturbed. And that is just the last rationale we had for the plant material selections. Everything is obviously a native plant material appropriate to the site and cleared through both on-site consultants as well as city consultation. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, great, thanks. That was a pretty comprehensive presentation. I'm going to ask first whether panel members have any questions of you. Peter?
I had one question, excuse me, one question related to the lined trees along the rail corridor. We were aware that we get notification from the rail company around spraying. I don't know how often they spray in this area, but maybe you could advise how far the new trees would be from that spray zone, if you will, of their pesticide management or invasive species management program?
Yes, right now we're actually, I think it's 4 meters away from the right of way of the train line, so the edge of where they're right away, and then we maintained an edge of where we knew there was going to be encroachment, if you will. We were not necessarily thinking about overspray because usually when it comes to that, it's not. It is people walking with the the backpacks, that kind of thing. So the overspray is more environmentally going to be wind-borne based on what the weather is that day. You would hope that they wouldn't be doing it too much when it was a heavy wind day, but we did maintain a certain corridor, and we also were cognizant of the fact that we wanted to make sure that the mature canopy of the trees would not encroach into the train right away as well, because there is a tendency to prune the canopy in a straight line along the train corridor, and we wanted to make sure that right plant for the right place is appropriate there, and we wanted to keep it as far away from the train corridor as possible from a mature canopy standpoint as well.
If I could maybe, as an advisement in the follow-up in the progress reports, I can't remember what they're called, the annual updates on the health of the ESA enhancements, that it be included when you're aware of CN Rail coming by in spring, and ensuring that at least it's noted, and if there's any issues that arise as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be advised to be added to the maintenance and monitoring program.
That's, I'll leave that with staff, but yeah, I think
Okay.
that should be reviewed and conveyed to the city.
Thank you.
That's it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, I do appreciate the work you've done with staff to try to minimize some of the impacts. Just one question on the machine shop itself. There was one quick rendering in there. Just if you could comment on what that's really going to look like at the end of the day, as far as the finishes of the building, et cetera.
Just let me share my video. So, hi everybody. So thanks for having me. Shane Scroggie with BC Ferries. Yeah, just to speak to that, it is a metal cladding exterior. The rendering is fairly representative of what the structure is going to look like. Apologies, I don't have the architect here with us, so.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just wasn't sure if that was representative or it actually was meant to really reflect what the building would look like at the end of the day. Okay, thank you.
It is correct, yes.
Okay, no questions from me, so we'll move on to city staff comments on this project, and then we will open it up for any public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of quick comments. In terms of the strategy for the site, there will be an invasive species removal strategy for all designated ESAs as part of the compensation plan. There was reference to a monitoring requirement for this the ESA compensation areas. We will be securing a legal agreement prior to this development permit proceeding to council for consideration, securing a 5-year minimum maintenance plan for all planting compensation areas. At the end of the day, we are satisfied that the proposal before you, it does represent a net gain in habitat function throughout the site.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Craig. I have a question for you. In general terms, is what we're looking at today consistent with what was proposed for the rezoning?
To the chair, yes. In terms of the rezoning that was considered by council in 2019, the uses are consistent. There are has been a significant scale back of the expansion plans, most notably the removal of the marine crane and the number of new buildings proposed. In terms of compensation approach for the ESA, this does maintain those original intentions despite the reduced footprint.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. I'd like to open it up for public comment. If there's anyone here that would like to make comments to the panel regarding this project. Sir, did you want to come down? So if you can come down to the microphones on the chair, Yeah, we're not too formal, but we just need to get you down there. And
Hear everybody.
yeah, we're doing our best. And we just, before you make your comments on the project, just can you give us your name and address for our record, please?
John Hall, Canelo Cloth, 12200, number 5 Road.
Okay.
Okay, we had a very short notice feedback. So we put our questions together today, and just for the record, our family has been at that 12200 number 5 Road dwelling since 1959. My mother and father worked very diligently for the city of Richmond. My sister is a teacher in Richmond. My brother is a firefighter. My other sister worked at the now demised Big Mac, which was a swimming pool. And our goal was to keep that property in a form of sanctity. Can't get the right name right. But we didn't want to have it demolished and turned into a warehouse. All that aside, I have 6 questions. And what is the purpose of the development? i.e., is it going to be for parking or manufacturing? Where will the entrance points be located? Because our right-of-way would be still feedback. Mm-hmm. Our right-of-way would be one of, there's no way you can get into that property unless you're using our driveway. So, and question number 3 is, where are the environmental areas located, the sensitive ones? Because when they built the tunnel, there was a lot of ponds put in, but apparently it seems to be in the estuaries that are around the actual BC Ferries work yard. Another question is, what is the timeline of development? Like, when does it end? Because if they're going to use our driveway for a point of access, you know, it's going to denigrate our living quality when we have trucks running all the way up the road. So, you know, what is the impact on the quality of life, and when does it end? And another question, what would the hours of operation be? Once you review the actual property that we live in, and then you begin to understand where and how they're going to work. As far as BC Ferries goes, how's that going to impact us? And that's all I have.
So are you asking the hours of operation through construction, demolition and construction, or are you talking more generally about the hours of operation on the site after the changes?
the question is, what access are they gonna have? Yeah, to be
Well, what
more
I'll do-
clear,
Okay,
what is the access road
yeah,
into the development, and then what hours will they be running?
oh, okay, yeah. Okay, all good questions. So is that the extent of the questions?
Uh,
I have one.
Oh, really?
talk loud.
Yeah, you have to come and sit at the table if you've got a question. No, they're the rules.
Oh,
Name and address.
I can sit here.
take care.
Yeah, you can both sit there. No, you can,
I can sit here too.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
The slide number 10 has, like, maybe we're jumping the gun on our concerns. Maybe all the surrounding property isn't going to all be demolished and used as parking lots, my concern.
No, in fact, what's going to happen is a lot of the old buildings are going to be taken down.
That's fine,
A new building
yeah.
will
So that's all the,
will be built.
that's all the
And
point.
then, and I'll have staff explain it in a, bit more
Yeah,
clarity.
I think we're jumping the gun
And then a
because,
lot of the existing areas, there are actually a number of different types of environmentally sensitive areas on the site.
yeah,
A lot of the areas near your property will actually be enhanced
okay.
through this
Is
process,
this the
so.
first meeting for this, or is this going to be all
It
decided
isn't
today?
the first meeting in that there was a rezoning process, I think in 2019, Wayne?
Yeah,
So there would have been a notification for that. That rezoning did go ahead.
yeah,
And what we're doing here today, because under city policy, the applicant, the owner, they can't just do whatever they want in the sensitive areas.
Right.
So what we're looking at today is their plan to protect and enhance the
Okay. Yeah,
environmentally sensitive areas.
yeah, I go by Rice Mill Road quite a bit.
Yeah.
So,
So that's what this is about. I think maybe what I'll do, so in terms of the purpose, it's basically to upgrade the site
Yes.
by eliminating
I'm
a
good
lot
with
of
that, yeah.
old dilapidated or inefficient
Absolute.
buildings and
Yeah.
replace with one new one. And then I think maybe Wayne, I'll get you to address some of the other
Yeah.
questions. I mean, I've got here entrance, the environmentally sensitive area locations, timeline. Can you run us through that, or someone?
Yeah, through the chair, in response to the delegates' questions, the entrance to the site will remain as a current configuration, which will be from Rice Mill Road. There's an existing access road from Rice Mill that will be maintained and continue to be used as part of the FMU. It's used now, and it will be maintained as part of a redeveloped FMU in the future. In response to questions about, and actually going back to the access location, there is no access proposed from number 5 road. All access will be from Rice Mill Road. In relation to questions about the environmental areas, the site has numerous environmental designations on it, mainly associated with its location along the river or the foreshore. There are also some vegetated areas in the area north between Rice Mill Road and the CN Rail right-of-way. Those are ESA areas and are also incorporated as part of the enhancement areas being proposed as part of this project.
So do you think we could, the applicants are remote, but can we throw a graphic up on the screen and someone point out, because there's an RMA, there's ESA, there's ESA upland.
Yeah, I couldn't see the
Yeah.
legend.
That's slide 4.
Something
Slide
simple.
4, the slide that's just coming up.
Yeah,
Well, slide 10 was pretty good, but I could not see any of what the descriptions on the legends were.
there we go.
Yeah, so this is a
Thank you.
just general overview of the site plan, and I believe they're looking to,
So please identify Rice Mill Road.
It's way up top.
Rice Mill Road is where the cursor is at the top of the picture.
Yeah.
That's where
Okay.
Rice Mill Road is.
Because our access road was formerly Rice Mill Road.
Yeah. If you, there's no name to our access road now.
You're 12,200. Are you the corner lot?
Yeah, the last on the left.
Okay, yeah.
So come on by anytime.
So no change to the access. And then do we have a graphic that shows the various ESA areas that we can put up? Here we go. That one's pretty good. So who wants to take a crack at explaining these?
So all the land that's west of the curving railway track, the CN rail,
That's all, that's
all on the
going,
left bottom there.
that green stuff is going to stay.
Yeah, you have
Okay.
to shift over.
Okay, so
And-
that will
and-
It's
stay.
gonna stay.
It's-
Not only
it's
does it
very hard-
stay, but it actually gets enhanced,
Okay.
right?
That's correct.
I'm making this up, so. if I
Through the
get it
chair,
wrong-
yes. Part of the enhancement, the environmental sensitive area enhancements are, those planted areas are going to occur in that yellow shaded area, which is in the area between the CN Rail Corridor and Rice Mill Road. So that will, no development as part of the BC Ferries FMU project will occur in that area. Those are where
Why is
the,
it listed?
Oh, like it's those big billboards they've got nicely, but they're not very,
Which was shined up just
it just says
3 days ago.
parking.
through the chair, in response to the questions about why it's included, it's because they're part of the ESA compensation being put forth as part of this development proposal.
Okay,
Right
and then
there.
there's ESA along the border. And where's the RMA? Along the eastern part of the site, the blue?
That's correct.
Yeah.
There's two RMAs that apply to the site. The RMA specific to the redevelopment that was
Oh, yeah.
covered in the presentation
Along
is
Rice Mill.
the yellow or orange RMA that runs along the site's north edge. There is a larger blue RMA that's not being impacted as part of this development.
Yeah.
And finally, the foreshore and intertidal areas are identified in the purple and the green shaded areas. The majority of the compensation for those areas are being provided for in the southeast portion of the basin where the cursor is generally hovering.
Yeah, but near these folks' property, you're going to have enhancement of the yellow RMA, enhancement of the green treed area. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Enhancement
Yeah.
meeting.
Invasive species removed from the area and new shrubs and trees planted.
So you can clear the area to plant.
Where's the wildlife corridor going to be?
Along
Right
the,
along that track, that's good.
along the railway.
But on the north side of the railway, of course, because,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But
what
it's
I
gonna
would,
remain a green belt, is what you're saying. Is that correct?
yes,
Correct, yes, that's part of the,
yes.
So
Okay.
if they wanted to maybe change it in the future,
They would
because they
have,
own the land, they'd have to
they
reapply?
would have to
And
come
then
back.
what was our, and these are the two main things. So, it remains a green belt and the old Rice Mill Road is not gonna be an access to that property development. All that enhancement or roadway is gonna be coming up what is now currently Rice Mill Road.
Yes, that's my
Is that correct?
understanding.
Through the chair, to be clear, the area north of the rail right-of-way is zoned agricultural. Any future development of industrial
Are you
activity
cursoring that right now?
It's
Sorry.
the green part north of the railway.
Right.
will require application to city council.
Right.
That application would be subject to the similar process we're going through now.
So you get notice of
Yeah,
any
yeah.
change. What I'm going to suggest is, because it's hard to follow it all on the screen, but if you are interested in the details of it,
Sure.
I'd suggest you contact staff
Okay,
and come in and we can
excellent.
show you real plans.
Oh.
Or,
I'm sure your choices and plans and all the expertise, I have no, doubt or reservation about the jobs that you do for Richmond, and in this one
And
it
then
would be no different.
Then the hours of operation, I'm not sure who can address that. Is the applicant there?
Hi, yes, yeah, I can address that. So the bulk of any of the work taking place on site would be on day shift. We don't have any plans on doing any night shift work on the site. But again, any of that work would be taking place on the existing FMU site.
So
Yeah,
is
which we
essentially
currently
no
have buildings.
no change in hours, or is that what you're saying?
No.
Okay. All right. Thanks
you
very
so
much for your
much.
questions.
It's a lot of work to wrangle such a,
It'll be quite an
large
enhancement.
project.
Yeah.
right?
Thank you.
It's very good.
Okay, we dealt with questions for staff, right? So public, is there anyone else that wants to comment on this project? No, you're all lined up for the next one? Okay. All right. Anything written on this one, Wayne? All right, we've got a staff recommendation, which is positive. Oh, before we go there, for the applicants, you're replanting a bunch of trees, but there are 24 that you're proposing to cash in lieu, because presumably you can't fit them in the environmentally sensitive areas. I'm wondering, can you fit them on the site elsewhere outside of the ESA or RMA areas? Like, you've got a couple of parking lots that are pretty bare. I'm wondering whether you've looked at that. Because to be quite honest, we would prefer to have trees installed than take cash for trees. And so have you looked at that?
Yes, actually, we had discussed that with city staff in the past. And at that time, I think the preference was to replace the trees within the northern parcel of property. But no, if the city's agreeable, I think we should hopefully be able to find spots for those 24 trees south of the railroad tracks around the dike area. And we could work with them on that.
Well, we would leave it to you. You know, if with the guidance of all your consultants, you can't fit more in the sensitive areas, my thought is, you know, installing the 24 trees elsewhere on the site outside of the ESA areas, I would be fine with that. In fact, I would prefer that you do that to pay cash in lieu. But it's, and I don't have a preference to where you put them necessarily. I would leave that to you, your consultants, and the city staff team.
No, that's great. That's actually our preference as well. So we'll work with our team and city staff on that.
Okay, all right. So is there someone to move the staff recommendation? Moved. Second, Peter. I'll call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? So it's carried. And direction to staff to work with the consultant to plant the 24 trees elsewhere on the site, and maybe sort that out before this goes to council. Yeah, thanks very much. And by the way, to the applicants, I think it was a really comprehensive job that you did on this proposal. I'm quite confident it'll be quite an enhancement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the, just pulling up the agenda here on my iPad, to the next item, which is a development permit. Thank you. The applicant is Oval One Holdings Limited. The property location is 6011 River Road. The development permit is to allow for 368 residential units on the site in a 3-tower configuration. There is one variance to the zoning bylaw, and it's to increase the amount of bicycle storage space, I think in a bicycle room from 40 to 70. So with that, the applicant again is remote, is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you, Chair. We can get started now.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jamie Colwell. I am the Director of Development at ASPAC Developments, the owner's rep for development at 6011 River Road. Just want to start off by saying a big thank you to our city planner and all the city staff we've worked with over the past, I think it's been 1.5 years since we made our initial application, and a big milestone to get to DP panel today. Here with me today, I have our architect, Vance Harris and Brady Dunlop from Dialogue Design, and our landscape architect, Chris Phillips from PFS Studio. And we have support staff, Lynn and Owen Craig from both offices here that are helping us with the presentation. Owen, next slide, please. Oh, Owen, can you put the slide up? There we go. There's our development, 6011 River Road. Sorry, Owen, next slide, please. I just want to get into some of the history of where we are at River Green. Next slide, Owen. There we go. Awesome. On the screen here, we have some photographs of our past projects in Richmond. ASPAC's been proudly developing in the city of Richmond for the past 15 years. We've been operating in the Metro Vancouver region for 30 years. To date, we've built just under 1,400 homes in Richmond at our River Green community. With the housing that we've built, has come a lot of great amenities for the area, including a lot of local public art, dike upgrades to combat flooding, new waterfront park trails, a lot of road and infrastructure upgrades, and more recently, a new childcare facility that opened earlier this year, and which we turnkeyed to the city and is now operated by the YMCA. So we are really committed to be in Richmond and to continue developing River Green. It's been fantastic to see the community grow as envisioned for the CCAP plan. Earlier this year, we finished off developing our last piece of land located on the east side of the Richmond Olympic Oval. We are now focusing our efforts to develop the remaining lands located on the west side of the Richmond Olympic Oval. This land was purchased pre-zoned directly from the city of Richmond back in 2007. And we're really excited to continue delivering thoughtfully designed homes and high quality developments, which is what we're known for in the industry and in the area. And more importantly, contributing to the crucial need of housing in Metro Vancouver, given the housing crisis that we're in right now. Before I hand it over to the design team, I do want to make it known that our team was made aware earlier this week that there are some concerns from the residents and the neighboring development. Our design team is in receipt of these concerns as of yesterday, so it's a bit last minute. But through our presentation, they will address some of these concerns. Now I'm going to hand it off to Vance and Chris and Brady to carry out the presentation, and I will be here to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Jamie. Yeah, and thank you, Chair and panel, for your consideration. So yeah, I'm going to pick up on a couple of threads that Jamie spoke on. I am then going to walk through our project, hopefully in a very descriptive way to address or at least explain how we have addressed various elements such as access and massing and views, traffic reduction, etc. As Jamie mentioned, we were made aware of some concerns. I will go into those sort of through the course of the presentation. I don't want this to simply be focused on those concerns, but actually weave in sort of responses to any anxieties in the course of explaining the project. So perhaps the next slide is the right way to move forward, Owen. So just to set the stage, as Jamie mentioned, we're looking at the west side of River Green, and these photos, I'm sure you all know the site well, but just to set the stage and remind you of the sort of oddly shaped nature of the site. It's a unique property. It's up against number 2 road, the number 2 road bridge. River Road curves around from the north and peels off the northwest, the northeast corner rather of the site, resulting in a frontage that's actually set back quite a ways further from the river than the previously developed River Green parcels. And I'll get to that in how we responded with our massing and building placement. Next slide, Owen. So one of the key things I really want to sort of underscore all of this with is this is part of a larger vision. We're trying to make good on a larger promise that was started many, many years ago, after the Olympics and post development of the Oval. And you'll see this in a few ways, both in terms of where we've landed the buildings. So there was a large urban design gesture previously established with a promenade down the middle of the site. We very much used that as an organizing element in the placement of buildings, and you'll see that when we get into a little bit more detail. Chair, you mentioned at the beginning in summary that this is a 3-tower development. We've done that very intentionally. You'll note in plan a lot of the previous properties had been developed with much larger slabs, much larger floor plates, and precisely because of a desire to maintain as many views as possible and minimize shadowing, we broke the site down into 3 towers, which I can attest was actually not the easiest decision we could have made, but we'll walk through our thinking in the subsequent slides. So, Owen, next one. Here in this slide and the next couple, we just want to kind of provide a couple of quick diagrams to get you inside of our heads, and apologies for that, to sort of underscore the basic thinking behind placement of the buildings and location of major amenities. So sun angles and views are obviously of primary importance in any development, no less here. I mentioned number 2 road and number 2 road bridge. And while we're not talking about parcel D, which is even further to the west across number 2 road, there was a desire expressed by staff and embraced by us to create a gateway to Richmond with the development of this property. And then as we masked up the buildings, we wanted to maintain both sun angles through to a large outdoor elevated green space, as well as the aforementioned public promenade that had been established earlier. Next slide, Owen. You can't develop a property like this lot without considering why people are going to want to move to this area, and that's adjacency to the river and the views to the north and to the west. However, in sort of completing that urban promise of building out the village at River Green, we also spent just as much time focusing on the urban edge, if you will, the River Road edge on the east side, and how these buildings that we're introducing both complement and elevate the sense of community and urbanity that was started prior to even us getting involved. Outdoor amenity spaces, as you'll see, are very, very important in the organization of the scheme, as are the placement of public amenities for residents of this development. So the treatment of the rooftops is both significant to the notion of gateway, but I would also add it sort of gives credence to what we call the 5th elevation. The roof has more than just a roof. It's something that people see, look down upon, glance over top of, and we've taken great care to both plant these and animate them with materials and uses that make them pleasing and highly useful. Next slide, Owen. The nature of the urban design framework for the Oval Precinct talks about stepping down to the river, and we've very much taken that into account, both in the division of floor plates into smaller tower plates, allowing us to step heights, in this case, from 13 down to 6 stories, with our towers A and towers B along River Road on the east side. But it also it has allowed us to think of how we differentiate the east-facing facades of the buildings versus the west-facing facades. So in the diagram on the lower left, we're identifying this desire to speak to the existing buildings across River Road in a language that's very similar, being respectful and similar. Whereas because of our gateway perhaps even bookend nature of this site next to number 2 road, we created a decidedly different facade pattern that addressed the higher speed that people are moving past on along number 2 road. Owen, next slide. I mentioned views, and yes, of course, we think of the views of residents in the development that we're working on, but one of the main reasons in breaking this site up into 3 towers was actually thinking of those residents living adjacent and how to maintain their views, particularly on the upper floors where, as you get towards the south end of the site, it's those upper floors that are going to have those very lovely views out to the northwest. So we did a lot of diagramming and analysis to make sure that we were maintaining as many of those as possible. This is probably a good slide to point out, or at least acknowledge, how much further back from the river our site is set. So the height of the northernmost development on our site lines up with the lowest stepped portion of the adjacent lands. So it's not a linear horizontal comparison. We're actually set back quite a bit further. Next slide, Owen. So I'm going to quickly walk through the ground plan because I think this is actually a very important, it's a plan, but it's also a very important diagram for how the site works. Not the easiest site, as I mentioned. So maybe starting outside to in, we have a multi-use pathway wrapping around River Road from the north and along the east side of our site. So it flanks both Towers A and Towers B. That multi-use pathway sits in behind a planted boulevard and in front of planted entry porches and raised stoops that lead into the townhomes along River Road. This creates, both a very sort of modulated street front, but it also pushes our buildings back, a very comfortable distance from the buildings across River Road. We're in excess of 85 feet, between 87 and 96 feet away from the buildings across River Road, which is a very comfortable spacing. We see this as a very pleasant road and a pleasant urban realm between the two buildings. And we actually don't anticipate a significant amount of additional traffic along this road. And I'll get to how we've addressed our traffic access in a moment. In addition to the multi-use pathway on the north and east side of the site, we actually have a large statutory right-of-way along the west side of our site. Without getting into too much detail, it's there to provide maintenance access to the bridge, but it also provides a wonderful opportunity to increase the multimodal access around the site. Multimodal in the form of peds and bikes, not regular vehicle use, but it is an opportunity for another pedestrian and urban promenade, which also connects to an under the bridge park design that Chris Phillips will get a chance to speak to after I summarize here. Moving to the south side of the site, we have a common entry court for this entire development. So it is 3 towers, but we have a common entry court on the south. This is one of the primary reasons why we don't anticipate a significant amount of traffic, additional traffic along River Road to the east. Most of the traffic is channeling in from the south. And even at that, the work that our traffic consultant did identified that there'd be a very nominal adjustment in the average number of cars per minute on this site. And certainly from a safety standpoint, the roads are getting treated and controlled in a way that will actually slow down that traffic and make the intersections, in fact, more safe than they are at the moment. We do have front door access, if you will, at all 3 buildings. Tower A to the north does have a front door on River Road, just not vehicle access at that point. And Tower B also has a lobby access on River Road, but also a pass-through lobby access to the drive court. Tower C in the southwest corner of our site has lobby access off of that central drive court. We do have bike storage on all 3 levels. We've taken great pains to actually reduce the number of cars that we have on site. So we actually have 370 bike stalls identified on level 1 alone. We also have an e-bike charging and parking area along the statutory right-of-way. And we also have bike maintenance facilities on this level. In terms of loading for the whole project, we have loading access in the middle of the building, accessed from the north, adjacent the statutory right-of-way. That's a lot of talking about one plan. Maybe we'll go down quickly into levels P1 and P2, just to show primarily further car use reduction that we've taken into account. We have an additional 228 bike lockers on this level, as well as 2 dedicated car share stalls. Those car share stalls, they're highlighted here in blue. They're located adjacent the tower core for Tower A, but more importantly, they're quite adjacent to the bottom of the primary vehicle entry ramp. Very quickly, Owen, down to P3. Again, just to highlight that we've got an additional 242 bike lockers. So we, for a lot of reasons, Richmond specific, don't want to go below P2 from an excavation strategy. But, as I said, we don't want to bring any more cars into the neighborhood than absolutely possible. And as you noted, Chair, that the one variance we're asking for on this entire project is actually to have one of the bike rooms be slightly larger than one would typically find. Owen, next slide, and maybe I'll segue there to identify that we've actually kept completely within all zoning setbacks, height requirements, densities, without requesting any variances. So the design response you see is really what we feel is the best possible community response and gateway response, wholly within the urban design framework and the zoning allowances. I'm going to quickly do I'll call it a virtual fly-through just by use of fixed imagery, but we'll sort of fly around the building. I'll give you a sense of how we've established a place before I hand the floor over to Chris Phillips to talk about the probably even more important continuity of sort of the urban ground plane. So this view is looking from the west. We see a number 2 road bridge right in the foreground, and we see how the elevated central court or landscape amenity area acts both as a focal point for this site, for the overall project, as well as providing a gateway element in the treatment of the amenity space, which I'll talk about very briefly when we get to the materials board. So on next slide, as we sort of fly around the site, this is looking still from a high angle. We're now at the southwest corner of the site, looking northeast. One of the important things to consider, or at least from our standpoint, we considered as important when thinking of what a gateway was making a statement that was very particular at the southwest corner. And by taking a 3-tower approach rather than a slab building approach, we were able to place what we feel is a smaller, more slender gateway massing at that corner, while making space for the rounded, more finely clad amenity pavilion. Next slide, Owen. I actually like this slide because it starts to talk about a couple of things that underscored our approach to the project at sort of first principles level. We wanted to create complete streets. We wanted to build out all of those promises I mentioned of the overall master plan. And we wanted to create a very rational approach to vehicle and pedestrian access. So here you see the common vehicle court in the sort of left-hand side of the image between towers B and C. You see the very generous right-of-way between our development and the adjacent development, with that planted boulevard, parking lay-by, multi-use pathway, etc. And then in the middle of our site, you can see we've not only stepped down Tower B, but created that break between buildings to continue the promenade, and also in so doing create a place for public art, which I'll show a little bit more in detail in a subsequent image. Next slide, Owen. Circling all the way around to the northeast, this is probably a good place to point out a couple of points of access. You can just see the service lane access running into the site adjacent where the statutory right-of-way runs along Number 2 Road Bridge. And then you can also get a peek of the park running under the bridge, which, as I mentioned, Chris will touch on a little bit further. This curved river road created a number of design challenges, but also actually urban opportunities. We could tuck a lower building into this apex of the road, set back from the river, but scaled in a way that was very residential and actually did, being, perhaps more respectful in keeping with how the adjacent properties were massed and stepped down. So we feel it's very complementary. Next slide, Owen. The quick comment here is really just about Gateway. Couple of things. I know we're not talking about the project to the right, but they have been developed in parallel. How that informed this particular project was that the placement of that Tower C with a smaller footprint right adjacent the bottom of the Number 2 Road Bridge. You can also see the amenity pavilion just prior to the Tower C. Next slide, Owen. I'm mindful that there's a lot of stuff that Chris, valuable stuff that Chris is going to say too, so I'm trying not to take too much more time. This is a pedestrian level shot from someone walking over the bridge. And this is looking down the SRW, the statutory right-of-way, primarily showing how we've landscaped the edge of our low podium and really set the stage for quite a striking amenity pavilion in the middle that will be clad with a copper-like material, sort of a shinier, more precious material that lets it stand out. Next slide, Owen. Completing the picture of Gateway, Gateway isn't just when seeing a building from the air. We don't experience buildings from the air unless we're flying into the airport. Gateway needs to work from a pedestrian level as well. So this was one of the shots that we felt demonstrated the intentional positioning of that tower. Just quick, mentioning of the airport, that one of the concerns we're aware of from adjacent property owners is sound, is noise. In designing this building, one of the primary considerations was actually noise from the airport. And while we hired an acoustic consultant to look at the project, all of their focus was on how to ameliorate sound from the airport. So we actually feel that placement of these towers, if anything, would likely buffer airport sounds to the adjacent neighbors to the east. I already touched on the fact that we don't anticipate a significant amount of increased traffic, so we don't anticipate additional noise from that. Just looking at my notes of some of the concerns that Jamie mentioned we received yesterday, noise being one of them, adjacencies being another. I've already touched on sort of that comfortable spacing that we built into the project between ourselves and those across to the east. Shadows being of a concern primarily on the promenade. We're actually, as I noted, continuing the promenade. So we don't think that shadows will be an issue there at all. In fact, we've stepped the building immediately south of the promenade on our property down to the lowest height that we see on our development. Traffic was the other primary concern. I'm just making sure I've touched on all of them. I think we've just got one more slide that touches on materials before I hand it over to Chris. Oh, my apologies. Drive court. This, I think, just underscores sort of that primary point of access that I talked about. All vehicles are coming and going from this one point of access to the south, not actually adjacent any of the existing River Green properties to the east. Next slide, Owen. I keep promising we're getting to the materials slide. I promise we are. Perhaps just closing out another pedestrian level view. This one from the southeast corner. We're actually looking up River Road, and the adjacent buildings are actually just off the image on the right. But you can see there's a fairly direct view, or a very direct view north up River Road with our building setback with a planted multi-use pathway and entry courts. Next slide, Owen. Public art. This is a view of the end of the promenade, the break between our buildings and the dedicated location for public art. Next slide, Owen. Oh, now I feel maybe I build this up. I better spend a moment here. We're finally at the materials board. We've really taken pains to differentiate the top or the crown of these towers from the primary building facades, both east facing and west facing, which, as I mentioned, were treated slightly differently in amassing from a massing standpoint, and then the base of the building being more stone-like. So we are using a feature metal, itemized number 7, around the amenity pavilion. We're using more lighter sandstone and panel for the foreground tower cladding, background being slightly more muted charcoal in color. And that transitions to slightly heavier, both visually and darker stone materials at the base of the building, which of course frame landscape treatment, paving patterns, planting, and the like, which is probably a very good way to segue over to Chris. And I'd be happy to go back to anything, as questions arise. So Chris, perhaps we shift it over to you.
Thanks, Vance. Good afternoon, members of the panel and members of the community who are attending the meeting. I'm going to speak to the overall landscape of the site. Before I do that, I just want to remind everybody about the fact that in the overall rezoning for the site, a comprehensive open space strategy was developed, which included a whole number of initiatives, a number of parks and open space, particularly along the waterfront, a series of pedestrian and cyclist connections, public art strategy, history interpretive strategy. And many of these have been delivered already through the various developments that are complete, For Lot 1, there's several requirements in that comprehensive plan, and that is providing a number of pedestrian and cyclist connections through the site, which we're doing, and a public art location. We're also proposing an additional amenity, which is this idea of improving under the bridge. Number 2 Road Bridge has quite a large clearance, and we're suggesting or supporting the idea that this could be a public space, which Aspect would support in this process. This isn't part of the development permit application, and it would require a separate process with the city since it's city land. But I think it's a great initiative to improve the public realm in this part of the River Green Village. Next slide, please. So there's a series of diagrams that Vance has gone through, but there's a few key ones that, from the landscape perspective, I wanted to speak to. We're providing a series of pedestrian and bike routes that are combined one adjacent to the bridge, that green line on the kind of left diagram, and the red, which is a series of wide multipurpose bike and pedestrian routes. And that's part of the overall comprehensive connectivity from the south to the waterfront. And also the landscape provides an important aspect to the gateway coming into Richmond. The buildings are set back with a large roof area and a large setback from the bridgehead that preserves existing trees and landscape. And that sort of sets this context of a green entry into the city. Next slide. So this is the ground floor plan, and I know Vance has given you a pretty good overview of this, but I'll highlight just a couple of things. The green is the setback that's against the bridge. What we're doing is providing that sort of green dash line, a wide combined bike and pedestrian route. This connects north to south. Also, there's a setback of landscape against the bridgehead, which preserves some of the existing trees that are there. And we're suggesting adding more trees. And we're providing a landscape buffer to the edge of the building. So the views are very much a garden kind of view. Where there's a dash line, it says under the bridge plaza. This connection through ideally would connect to this proposed other amenity under the bridge, which would connect across to Lot D, which is another aspect of the River Green project. Just to highlight that along River Road, we have the bike and pedestrian route with a streetscape reflecting on the other side with lots of street trees and grass boulevards and front doors and townhouse entries. And the main pedestrian routes, or the main vehicular routes, are away from River Road and away from the existing neighbors in parcel 2. Next slide. So this is just a rendering of that, but just to give you that sense of the wide landscape setback and pathway that leads up against the bridge, and the landscaped edges, and again the drive court to the south, and again the wide walkway for pedestrians and cyclists along River Green. Next slide. Oh, on River Road, sorry. This just is two sections, and I just wanted to show you the separation from the bridgehead with a large set of landscape, the area of existing trees and added trees to buffer the bridgehead and provide this gateway landscape, the wide shared pathway, this is in section 2, and then a landscape buffer against the building. And the service entry comes in at the back of the building, which is very discreet, and this is screened by landscape and architectural screening at that edge. And then section 1 just shows you the River Road, and where we have parcel 2 with the sort of front patios to units, sidewalk, lots of street trees and the separated boulevard. And similar on the other side, we've got a wider sidewalk, more setback, and lots of private patios, providing a bit of a garden edge facing onto parcel 2. Next slide, please. So on the upper levels, we're taking advantage of all the rooftops to provide amenities. This is level 2, and there's a indoor amenity, and that spills outside, and there's a series of amenities for all the residents and the living around this. Outdoor plunge pools, there's barbecue and patio and outdoor dining spaces. There's children's play, and there's gardens and a series of walking areas, and urban agriculture or raised beds for growing food. All of these are encouraging a sense of community. And of course, this has great west sun and nice views out to the west. There's a series of private patio spaces that align this, providing nice overviews and connections to that space. Next slide. And this is just a rendering of that sort of large green roof. We're having all these nice amenities set within a very garden landscape. You can see all the green. And then the series of amenities, the children's play, the pools, the patio areas, a lot of social spaces, and then some private garden spaces. Next slide. This is a view on level 2, looking across the children's play, the backdrop of the indoor amenity with the outdoor plunge pools, and the series of outdoor spaces for social gathering with patios, the barbecues, and so seating areas, all set within a nice landscaped setting. Next slide. As we move up the various levels up the building, we have a series of other amenities for the residents, and this is on level 9 and 10. So we have on level 9 what we call the Zen Garden. It's an indoor amenity space and an outdoor space, which is for sort of contemplation and enjoying the views with some social opportunities. And as we move up to level 10, again, indoor and outdoor gathering spaces where there's places for outdoor dining and socializing, all set within kind of a landscape setting. And we'll go to the next slide. So we're trying to take advantage of almost all the rooftops for extensive and intensive green roofs. Some of these, as I mentioned, are all for shared use for the residents, and some are just green roofs to deal with rainwater and views overlooks from the neighbors. And also we have a series of private patios off the buildings, trying to take advantage of all those rooftops to make them interesting and active. And next slide. So this is a view of the kind of Zen Garden up on level 9, and the this sort of gathering space like a tea house. One can gather and enjoy the setting on the rooftop. Next slide. And again, level 10, this is more of the social space with the indoor and outdoor social and meeting spaces, again, for the residents. And I think that's the last slide. And I'll turn that back over to you, Vance. And Jamie, do you have any conclusions?
Maybe just one last comment. You know, what I like about this image is you know, the animation, that the movement of the traffic. One thing I didn't touch on was just the nature of how one experiences this site, both during the day and at night, both at pedestrian speed and at vehicular speed. We're very proud of it. We feel it does uphold the challenge that we were given to create a true gateway and to create a fitting bookend to River Green. So, Jamie, final word?
No, you said it all, Vance. Great job, everyone. Over to you, Chair.
To me? Okay, that can. Oh, okay. I didn't hear the joke. Great, thank you. That was a very good and comprehensive presentation. Let's just see if Milton or Peter have any questions for you folks.
Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just had one question, which I hope is not complicated, and it's a question I ask when I see a very good project that was carefully thought through. But it's a simple pizza guy test. I guess we could say skip the dishes test. There's townhouses that front the road, so that's fairly simple. And there's the Parkade Plaza, parking entrance plaza. But maybe just if you can clarify those kind of front door interactions that for deliveries or for guests, how does that work?
I love the pizza guy test. We run that test as well in-house. So yeah, you touched on the drive court. That's the primary access to towers B and C. However, we've given Tower B call it a street point of access on River Road to the east, as well as giving Tower A that same front door access off of River Road. So we do see that although this is one overall site address, we've designed it such that there are 3 very distinct front door addresses to which the Uber or Skip driver or pizza delivery would come to, and then, as you pointed out, the townhomes themselves have their own front door address. So that is actually one of the biggest challenges of these large sites, is how to create that not that point of commerce, but that point of interaction, that front door. So we've intentionally done that, and I appreciate the question.
Thanks. And then I don't expect you to have the answer, but maybe through staff you can provide the answer, but I'll try. The extent of the green coverage, whether it be like in plan view, I'm thinking green roofs, tree canopy, shrubbery, etc. Do you have a sense of the overall percentage of coverage? And if not, maybe you can provide that to staff.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Metrics I'm not so sure about. We'd have to do the calculations.
We can certainly follow up through staff. As Chris pointed out, I don't think there was another inch that we could have greened. I think we've done our utmost to be as extensive as possible.
Yeah, that is.
But we'll follow up through staff.
We can provide those metrics. Yeah.
Thanks. Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. So Wayne, let's hear from you for the staff comments.
A few comments. With respect to the previous question, it's over 40% site coverage is live landscape material when you include the green roofs on portions of the building. In terms of additional comments, this site will be connected to the city's district energy utility. There are 40 basic universal housing units included in this proposal. The acoustical reports have been provided to confirm the site will meet CMHC interior noise and thermal standards. There is an extensive transportation demand management package which is included in this proposal. The TDM package includes a bus pass program, a car share spaces and vehicles, and enhanced on-site bicycle facilities, both storage and maintenance. The development variance which is associated with this is to allow one of the bike rooms to provide more than 45 storage units. We are supportive of that as it does respond to the city's objectives to encourage alternative modes of travel throughout the city. And there is an extensive servicing agreement for this project, including frontage work, road improvements, and site servicing. Happy to answer any questions.
I guess I have a question. The variance strikes me as a bit strange. Isn't more better?
It comes down to access to the rooms. So if they're overcrowded, they do provide a bit of an access issue.
Okay.
In this instance, that access issue is not present because we're actually installing family-size lockers, so not individual lockers. It's family-size lockers that allow for multiple bikes.
All right, thanks for that. Any questions for staff? No, looks like you're free. So that brings us to public comments. So I'm assuming you good folks are here because you'd like to comment on the project. Yeah, come on down, grab a seat, and just tell us your name and address for our record.
Yeah. Shanif Dushi.
Any comments?
5151 Brighouse Way, apartment 503, River Green 1 complex. I believe they said I think the gentleman was saying that part of the way they designed the building was to help our building with airport noise. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was a comment made that...
Yeah, so my question on that is, do they have the stats of how many calls from our building went to the airport concerning noise?
I would hazard a guess and say no.
No, so my guess is that was not really their concern. Their concern was more about airport noise to be helpful for their current building. Am I correct on that? Well, would that be a fair assumption?
Well, I can't speak for others, but I think that the comment...
Well, I believe, no, bear with me. I believe the comment was that the way they built it was to help our building with airport noise.
Yes, if you let me finish.
Yeah.
There was an observation by the applicant, not by me, so we can have the applicant speak about their intention. But the comment was along the lines of that they expect that the placement of the buildings on this property would help attenuate airport noise for existing buildings. But my recollection of the comment was that they expect that to be the case, but I don't believe that they have any evidence that demonstrates that that will be the case.
But so there was probably no phone calls to the airport or consideration to the calling the airport, finding that's
We don't have any information here.
So now, how many units are there? 374, is that what you said?
Sir, I'd like to know all of your questions, and then I will have, as the chair, I will have the appropriate people respond to your questions. So I'm going to ask you, let me know all of your questions, and then I will determine who will respond to them.
Okay, if somebody can help me out here, I believe they said 374 units, right?
So you want to know the number of units?
Yeah, and did they decrease the amount of parking spots to increase the size of the amount of lockers?
So what is the question?
So where are all those cars going to go if they're not going to be underground?
So you're asking what is the parking
Especially with the development on the other side of the bridge, where are all those cars going to go? If they're going to go on the road, then we're going to have more noise on the road. That's one of my questions.
The project has its own parking.
Sorry?
The project has its own parking.
Yeah, but I believe
once I have an idea of all of your questions, I will have the appropriate person respond to you. So
I believe,
you have a question about parking, and is there sufficient
If I can finish
parking?
my question, I'll get back to it because you interrupted. I believe they reduced the amount of parking spots in the complex to increase the amount of lockers.
I will have staff respond to that.
So if they did that, where are all those cars, especially with the project on the other side of the bridge, all going to go? There's already a limited amount of street parking for residents all around that area. So my question is, how are you guys going to deal with the noise with all those extra cars on the road?
Assuming that there isn't parking on the site.
Well, if they've reduced the amount of parking underground, I guess there's going to be reduced parking.
So is that the extent of your comments and questions, sir? Okay, thank you. You can take a seat.
Thank you.
And I will have someone respond to those questions. Mr. Craig, the first question is the number of units. Can you tell us how many units there are in this project?
Through the chair, the development proposal includes 368 apartment units.
368 units, sir. And in regard to the parking provision, is there a reduction of parking from the zoning standards? Is there a variance for parking associated with the project?
Through the chair, the proposal meets the Richmond zoning bylaw parking requirements. It is not seeking a variance to parking.
So no variance to parking. So any additional cycling or other facilities didn't come at the expense of parking on the site?
The site meets the zoning parking requirements.
Okay, sir. So no reduction of parking. Thank you for your comments and your questions. Yes, ma'am. Come on down.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Miriam Brown, and I live in C1303.
Name and address, please.
C1303.
Sorry?
C1303.
Okay, and your name?
Miriam
Miriam what?
Brown.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, it's not concern, and it's like a little like when we decide to buy in Richmond in River Green, we saw first one apartment, and they told us in a few years they go to block that view because was between the Oval and River Road and River Green. So they told us they go to build another building there, they go to block my view. Okay, you have something else? Oh yes, I have a penthouse. I'm never going to block your view there because the higher floor is going to be 9 floors. Now I got to have a neighbor in the 13th floor as well like me. So I spend the money to pay view and penthouse, and now they go to block my view. So I don't feel, when they tell you something, you can bought something and you feel good because nobody's going to block your view. And in the end, that's not true. I don't think it's a good thing.
Okay. Thank you for your comment.
Yeah. Before, actually, when you go, I don't know if they still, but if you go to the cell center, the model have a lower one. Never have a have one higher, but the other one is low. And now they go 13 both.
Yeah.
And they told like they check they work for our views. No, they work for their views, not our views. So it's not. I'm not happy with that.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else that would like to make comments? Come on down, sir.
My name's David Law, unit number 406-5171, Brickhouse Way. Unfortunately, I was looking at the drawings and it's going to completely block my view. But that aside, I was just wondering, when's the projected date for the start of the construction and when is the end date of the construction?
Right, okay, start and end. Are there any other questions that you
No.
have? Any other comments?
No.
Maybe I can ask the applicant. We don't control that at the city,
Yes,
but
yeah.
maybe we can ask the applicant. Any estimates for start date for construction and for completion of construction?
Through the chair, I can take that question. Depending on when the development gets approved and when we can bring this to market, ideally we'd like to get started on construction late 2024, and it will be likely a 3-year build out, 36 to 42 month build out. So that would take us to 2027, I think.
So maybe mid-year 24?
I would say late at the end. You know, we've got to get
Yeah.
through this process and we've got to
Well,
do
we're
the
almost
marketing
in
center,
24,
and it's
right?
a lot of work to get to
Yeah.
market. But yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like late next year for a start, and then 3 years.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make comments on this project? Anybody? Sir, come on down.
Okay, Chairman, panel members. My name is Peter Tsui, and my address is 1008 5177 Brickhouse Way, which is building C of the first phase of River Green. Okay, I believe that yesterday we delivered a letter signed by over 200 of the residents of Phase 1 of River Green that outlining several concerns. So my questions here that would today the panel or the developer be specifically responding to those. I believe we have 3 main points, right? Yes, the developer and the architect, or their team, during their presentation, they've been, addressing some of those, trying to address some of those. However, that based on the reason that today we do not have all the signatories present here, so I'm asking on behalf of all the signatories that whether it would be possible for us to have a official written response to our letter, right? So that, we'll be able to share with all the signatories, and then we can see whether there will be further questions. My second thing is that if we do come up with, if we do have response, and then we find there are further concerns or questions that we would like to ask, is there a venue of doing so? How should we go about it? Okay. All right. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. Let me just respond. We have received the correspondence, and so the panel members have that available. The city staff, once we finish the public comments, city staff will provide comments on the written correspondence. I think you asked about the provision of a written response. No, the panel does not provide written responses to correspondence. We consider it as part of our review and formulation of our recommendation to council, but we don't engage in replying back to written responses. And then depending on what happens with the project, if it moves ahead for council consideration, you cannot delegate directly to council. That's why the permit panel exists, to take public comment. You cannot delegate when the item moves on to council directly to council. But if you have questions or concerns about the project, if it were to move ahead, I'm not saying it will because we've not made that decision yet, but if it were to move ahead and you had questions or concerns, then you would contact city staff. And we can provide you after the meeting with a staff contact if you need that, sort of for day-to-day discussions or queries. Yeah, so we will get to that written correspondence, but right now we're just hearing from anyone that wants to speak to us. Okay? Is there anyone else that would like to comment to the panel? Don't want to rush anyone, but I don't see anybody, so I'm going to close the session for public comment. And Wayne, Mr. Craig, I guess we're at the written correspondence. Can you outline to us the correspondence and provide staff comments? And I think what would be handy maybe as a general comment, we've had some concerns about development on the site and views. If you can provide just a little bit of context, because I know that there was a master plan. It was always intended that this site would develop. We don't control necessarily what is said in the marketing and sale of property. The city doesn't control that. But can you give us a little bit of context, like how does this fit into the overall site and the master plan for the site?
All right. Through the chair, we have received quite a bit of correspondence on this application, so please bear with me. I'll start with the correspondence just mentioned by the previous delegation. So there is a letter with associated signatures from approximately 230 residents of the building across River Road to the east. There are three notable concerns referenced in that letter. The first concern relates to views. In terms of the development of this site has always been zoned for a high-density development. That zoning was put in place at the same time as the zoning was put in place for the existing building that exists on the east side of River Road. The proposed development does meet the zoning parameters with respect to height, density, and setbacks. There are no variances associated with this project. Further to that, the city does have development permit guidelines with respect to separation between towers. This project exceeds the minimum tower separation guidelines within the official community plan. The second concern noted in the letter is the implications of shadowing on the building. There is a shadow analysis provided in the development permit package. There is shadowing implications to the building to the east in the afternoon. In contrast, the building to the east does cast shadows over the subject site throughout the morning hours. There is a comment with respect to noise related to traffic. The building that was constructed on the east would have been subject to the same city requirements with respect to noise mitigation that are in place currently. The third concern noted in the letter relates to traffic volumes and potential traffic and safety concerns along River Road and specifically River Road and Brighouse Way. This development does comply with the city's transportation plan, the city's official community plan. As part of the development permit review, there was a third-party traffic impact study provided. That study was reviewed by city staff and accepted. It does indicate that the existing road network is sufficient with the upgrades proposed as part of this package to accommodate the traffic generated from the subject site.
And Mr. Craig, that study has been reviewed by our Transportation Department and accepted?
That is correct.
Yeah.
In addition to the letter just mentioned, we did receive correspondence from W.P. Chung at 5860 Dover Crescent, similarly noting concern related to traffic generated from the proposed development. If you bear with me, and I may ask the panel for a preference here. In addition to the 2 letters referenced, there is a combination of 42 letters from residents throughout the city expressing support for the development. Basis for support ranges from additional housing to the improvements that are provided in the area. I'm happy to go through the list of names and addresses, or as these have been provided as part of the written record, to rely on that.
Yeah, I think that's sufficient, certainly for me. If other panel members are comfortable with that. Okay, thank you. So that brings us to the panel deliberation. And maybe what we do have a, excuse me, I just got to pull up my agenda again. We do have a recommendation from staff, a positive recommendation. Is there someone to move?
I'll move it.
Melton? Yeah. Okay, seconded Peter. Okay, I guess my comment before I call the vote, I can remember the master planning for the site and the sale of the property, and it goes back some way. Certainly, it was always intended to develop this site, and as Mr. Craig has outlined, there are no variances to do with the use, density, or the height of any of this particular project. So I do understand that change, can be concerning if you're used to or you've been led to understand certain things, and we don't control at the city what is said, when property is being transacted. But certainly it has always been planned and intended that this site would develop. Given that there are no variances and given that it is a really very well developed project, I will be supporting the staff recommendation. So are there any other comments? So
I would just, I guess echoing, but in the context of a planned site, in a constrained site somewhat adjacent to the bridge as well as existing buildings, I think the development plan and proposed plan is a great response to those issues. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So it's moved, it's seconded. I'm going to call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? It's carried. Okay, thank you. Thank you for coming in, and thank you for your comments and questions. Mr. Craig, do we have any new business?
No new business, Mr. Chair.
And the meeting on the 29th is required?
That is correct.
Okay, someone move adjournment?
So move.
Second.
Done.